It's that time of year again when all around the world we wait anxiously for the arrival of Phishmas.
It's beginning to look a lot like Phishmas everywhere you go.
That magical time when there's no nice, there's only naughty, as the Phishmas elves go from website to website, stealing the gifts of passwords, credit card numbers, and personal data. Huh? What was that? Oh, so dozed off there for a second. Boy, what day is it? What day is it, boy? It's Phishmas, clever boy. Oh, David, you're here. Welcome to Cybersecurity Today, the weekend show. My guest today is David Shipley, and this is what we've called the research show. Both David and I are passionate about good research. We like research that's factual, where you can take away something useful. And that's where the examination and discovery comes into the picture. Because even the best research can give you just data. Notice I didn't say facts. People often confuse data with facts. What's the difference? Facts involve more than simply looking at data you've collected. Data can be an opinion. Data can be skewed. Data can be part of the puzzle. It can be accurate and still proved to be wrong, like the polls in an election. Or no, we won't go there. We're not going into the land of politics. So for data to make its way into the world of facts, you have to be able to extrapolate the impact of the data and ask yourself, what does the data mean? And that's where we can get into some neat things, like just because one thing happens at the same time as another doesn't mean they cause each other. We've all been through that. My famous example of there's a strong correlation between ice cream sales and drownings, but that doesn't mean that ice cream consumption causes drownings, but both happen in the summertime, which is my long-winded way of saying that oftentimes you have to dive deeper into the data, discuss it, and find out what you can take away that you can actually use. And in the spirit of Phishmas, which is like Christmas, only it happens earlier. Here's another correlation. The closer we get to Christmas, the more phishing that happens. And David, I'm going to open up with that. What is it about this season that makes everybody go nuts on phishing?
First of all, I think a lot of criminal gangs operate on the calendar fiscal year. So it's Q4 for everybody right now, and they're working those numbers, right? So it's a busy time. But obviously, of course, the amount of pressure individuals are under at work is very high this time of year. The amount of personal pressure can be very high. This creates tremendous opportunity. And of course, the volume of communications and the incentives that the retail sector is putting out. There's a reason why Black Friday is Black Friday. For those not familiar, that is the point in time traditionally when retailers actually make their money, between this mid to late November and December 31st, right before the Boxing Day kickoff. This is the Super Bowl of retail. And in that environment is the perfect conditions for fraud, for success. You've got the human minds are prime. You've got the serendipity effect. This is something I think we need to research more about, how much more probable it is someone's going to click on an Amazon fish when there's so much thinking and doing about Amazon in that particular moment.
Yeah. And you bring this up, and it's so funny because I started out in retail a long time ago selling jeans at Thrifty's Just Pants in Toronto on the corner of Church and Queen. And the thing that you pointed out was absolutely correct. I couldn't believe it, but you made all of your money in that Christmas season if you were a retailer. And then after Christmas, the sales and the margins went way, way down. And I was really amazed when we pile up all this stuff and put it into a sale at the exhibition ground. For anything that didn't go, they sold it for peanuts. Yeah. So there's the sheer volume of activity. And as you said, it's Q4 for these cyber criminals, or whatever you want to call them. And so there is a big increase. And we looked at this report. Speaking of our research, we've got this report that I'd gotten, which was the 2024 Online Holiday Retail Threat Report. It came from a firm called B4AI, which B4AI researchers analyzed 6,000 retail domains, and they found over 4,000 of them used retail keywords, brand names like Walmart, IKEA, Amazon, Flipkart, and then they'd manipulate these, adding words like shop, deal, and a thing called Typo-Squatting. Do you know what that is, David?
Yeah. So this is where you're looking for domains that are one letter or one number off of the legitimate domain. And really what they're taking advantage there is our human brain sometimes, particularly when we're tired, we'll see what we want to see. So if we're tired and we're quickly looking at something, yeah, that's the Amazon website. And it might be Amazons.com, not Amazon.com. And obviously there's this cat and mouse game that goes on back and forth between legitimate brands. And there's a whole subsector of security firms that actually just go looking for typo-squatting, domain squatting kind of names and try and get them taken down, buddy. Because now
You're going to get a lump of coal if you use that language on the show.
So now you've got Amazon.shop, you've got Amazon.ticket, you've got Amazon.deal, you've got all of these ridiculous domains. Not to mention the fact that you've got a world's worth of country domains sometimes can be really out. Again, you can see where I'm going with this. You can create an infinite number and you can do some of the things they noted like eBay-088. And keep in mind, the whole goal here is just have something with the name in it that's going to be able to be recognized and use that brand. And what's interesting from the study is that their notable use of .com, .shop, .vip, and .xyz. Like, dear global top level domain registrars, why did we need .xyz? Like, we were not running out of domain names. We're like, that's it. Can't find it. I'm just going to have a .xyz. Like, amazing. Thank you for that.
And some of these have been around a long time. And that's what I find that a little amazing. They gave a couple of examples of Walmart gift card 0 and whatever, and GoDaddy sites com or whatever. And these date back to 2013. Some of these are old.
Keep in mind that some of the ways that emails get evaluated, sending domains, links, etc., some of the clever things that we do with machine learning models on the defensive side go and look at the age and history and relative reputation of sites. So like a fine aged wine, fine aged domain, because like many email systems, many endpoint detect are going to be like, hey, this new Walmart 123 was registered in October 2024. That seems sketch, right? This is a tell. So that's where it gets to. What I find funny is we don't know how many of these domains that were registered were by criminals or by people like David, who run security awareness companies. And we've got 200 fake domains, right?
Yep.
And so that's not answered in this research report. Like, there's no global registry of, is this domain a scam or is it a simulated scam?
That's a training scam. Yeah.
Training scam.
Yeah. Okay. So that might explain why some of them are around. And I would guess that they would trade hands and stuff too. A domain could be around and could be sold. It could just temporarily lapse and be picked up again. There's all kinds of things that can happen to these.
And actually, you're onto something really interesting for small and mid-sized business folks listening to this call. You might have created a subdomain or a promotional domain or another domain, and you just, okay, we're done paying that $20 a year renewal cost, and away it goes. Like, recycled domains have incredible value on this side. So that's interesting to think about the digital environmental cost of domain name proliferation and domain name reuse and abuse, given the aforementioned point about reputational history.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten into the substitution of characters for domain names and some of the sophisticated stuff where you can actually use a different character that's from another language or another keyboard set, and it looks like a 1, and you can do all of those things. Fact is, this stuff looks pretty convincing. So a lot of the stuff that we train people to do, which is to check out the URL, is that now useless?
I wouldn't say
I've asked the tough question.
I wouldn't say it's completely useless, if only it's ways of people stopping and processing and thinking. But the challenge is we've made it so friggin' difficult to see URLs safely, particularly in mobile context and other things. So it can just be really hard to properly check this, which is why, like, giving employees an opportunity to use tools that can do this work for them, reporting the phish and getting an analysis feedback back on it could be helpful. I think we put too much on the end user to puzzle out some things when we could be helping teach more meaningful signals. Like, hey, does this deal seem too good to be true? Do you
Mm.
normally get your Walmart emails at work? It's hard. But the other part is, and this is where some of our research work is leading us, is fatigue and the impact on the human brain and cognitive load. What we can easily observe when we are not stressed, not tired, and not information overload is different than when all those other factors are in play. The old advice of just look for the grammar, the typos, and the crappy links was all done from a perspective that this was about intelligence. So someone being smart versus dumb versus someone being human and not human. I'm not going to completely dismiss it. It's just that we've seen greater success teaching people about the emotional indicators than we have just purely the technical indicators.
And a lot of these names imply trust. People shop at Walmart, they use Amazon. These are, and I don't know about everybody else here. And my wife doesn't listen to the program, thank God. I'm sometimes a little behind in my Christmas shopping. And if I saw something pop up that looked pretty good, I might go, oh, and I don't know. I think anybody could get fooled. So we've got the stress of the season, we've got the familiarity of it, and those things can more or less beat you on this. I guess you've given us one clue, and that is people need to think critically about the entire message.
Yeah.
Not,
This is why you should keep your personal life in personal email and not in your work email. Don't use your work email to do your online shopping. And I know all of a sudden the next objection in someone's mind is, but David, I don't want my spouse to see what I'm ordering. Cool. Create a burner email address for your online shopping so that you have that separate. But that way you're lowering the risk inside your work environment. I specify a lot of this, the work side is that while criminals obviously want to target and perpetrate frauds and particularly steal information, no doubt in my mind that a good holiday fish has brought down many an organization because of all the reasons that make it work.
these sites are no longer the sort of the poor knockoff of a site. They look exactly like a real Walmart or Amazon or Google or GoDaddy's page. I've seen a couple of them. They would fool you with the look unless you really knew what you were looking for.
The research report, showed some good examples once, but also some really poor ones. And I'll be honest, the poor ones can still work because, and again, this is where it comes back to the intelligence side. If someone's in a rush and the deal is too good to be true, and I can just picture, do you remember Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger? And they're running for that toy because as negligent husbands, they didn't do what their wives told them, which was order it well in advance. And then they were running around the entire city in a very stressful way. But when you're now frantic and running through, your brain can work against you. So they don't actually have to be that good. Now, what's terrifying is, again, to your point, with AI, they are getting better, it's scalable, and it's easier to clone. And it's getting that cat and mouse game. What was interesting from the report that I thought was interesting was the amount of these sites that are trying to get people to download and install apps. That stood out.
Yeah, I think the app thing is, I don't think it's new, but it adds a new dimension to this. And that is these fake apps from apparently legitimate retailers. And that's a killer because most apps have a login and you get comfortable with them. I don't know how they get them into the stores, but they do. And
Yeah. And it comes down to too. Now, remember, this is also where the EU has not necessarily been our friends when it comes to cybersecurity and the whole issue of forcing the ability to use non-Apple app stores in certain jurisdictions. And Android's had this for a while. You can sideload apps, you can use non-Google app stores, and be careful where you shop and where you buy and where you install your stuff from. And some of these apps are just downright nasty in terms of their ability to go looking for credentials, keystroke capture, that type of shenanigans, because it's trying to steal your money. So that was interesting on that side of the report.
yeah, the gift card thing is another one that happens at this time of year.
In the example, here's what's interesting, right? Like, just looking at the research report, I thought this was fascinating. Following the steps to claim your $750 Walmart gift card, and they walk you through, just click the Get Started button. This is familiar language. enter your email and basic info, complete the product poll, complete several recommended deals, and claim your reward. So what's interesting here is it's just believable enough. Okay, I'm going to get a $750 gift card. This is amazing. Oh, I just got to buy some stuff to get that. Oh, this is even better. And I'll get the deals and I'll claim my reward. It's great construction. But here's the beautiful thing about these criminals is that they learn, right? I've said this before in the podcast is that criminals are lazy, but they're not stupid. If they were just harder working, they would be legitimate business people. The fact that this works means that they're going to continue to leverage it.
Yeah. And so these things, you decide you're gonna actually get a free gift card from them, but you've given them all this information. So it's just a fake out to get you to give more information, and you're supposedly gonna wait for your $750
Yeah.
Walmart gift card.
Yeah. And by completing the recommended deals, my guess is they're capturing all the critical credit card information, expiry date, CVV2, and away we go. And I would not be surprised if there weren't live operators behind some of these things, literally capturing these as they go and placing orders. And who knows, maybe they've actually sent some people a $750 gift card after they've stolen several $1,000s from them.
Yeah, maybe I just looked at it wrong. I wouldn't believe the $750, but if you actually put $50 on that or $75 on that, I might believe it.
And again, A/B testing is a hell of a drug. My guess is that there's lots of different models out there trying this out. And yeah, there was a theory, a hypothesis that came across once before, and it's interesting to see this in the data set that sometimes the criminals choose their lures because they work on a very specific group of people. And that's an interesting hypothesis that in some ways they want to weed out the Jim Loves. A Jim Love might be the type of person who looks at this,
Or they
starts
don't have to pay him as much because he's not stupid, but he's cheap.
So it's interesting, right? And this is where we flag the risk of AI is that the ability to create and conduct A/B testing at hyper scale, at hyper speed is what keeps me awake at night about the future of phishing. So imagine you can have a system that dynamically creates these websites, is evaluating the results, has this giant big data feed of the Dave Shipleys, the Jim Loves, everybody else, starts figuring out what patterns are between these and just makes those subtle tunes. And one thing I can tell you about this, subtle changes in language, just small tweaks. Maybe it is your point, the $50 versus the 750. They can dramatically increase success rates. And this is in some respects marketing 101, nudge theory for those that follow that. But this is where I start to think about this. And the sheer scale and size of these activities overwhelms any chance at an effective policing response. And I would add this, we talk about the inflation crisis that continues to be a challenge for Western governments, and retailers are just getting hammered left and center, and they're pouring money, bucket loads of money into fighting these surges. And that's just further eating into retailers. And that's bad news for all of us.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before a lot. It is how you keep the sense of urgency and emotionality into to get people to get to that point where they're easier to fish. And if you're Canadian, sale, eh? I'm sure if you're American too, but these things are often not just gift cards. They're loaded with things like the biggest sale of the year, $1 billion sale, all of those things to keep the pressure on you. And I presume they do the same thing of trying to make it limited time offer and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, listen, marketing works for retailers and for criminals. Marketing is the arms dealer of the human mind. Right? Ethical
I get it.
marketing uses effective messaging to create values between individuals and organizations. And like I used to be a marketer, probably still am in the broadest sense of the word, even when I'm a fisher of men, as they are. But at the same time, really, this is all about intent. And so the cool opportunity presenting yourselves in understanding how to combat phishing and social engineering is that none of this is about computer science. All of this is about psychology, marketing, neuroscience, criminology. And that's where we need to invest more time in.
Yeah. And they get better and better at pursuing it. You talked about this having customer support available for these places that makes you feel like, oh, they've got customer support. They have to be real. And now, I guess with AI, it makes it even easier to have cheap customer support.
Absolutely. And what was interesting in this report was noticing the use of chatbots to add some additional authenticity. Now, what I thought was interesting about this is I got thinking about how these chatbots, particularly if they're powered by AI, could be used to help push the deal. So they land on this phishing link. It's a website. It's got the Walmart offer that's too good to be true. David pops up. Hey, can I help answer any questions? Is this a scam? Of course not, David. This is a great offer, limited time for people just like you. And I'm happy to answer your questions. How does it work? You complete some orders, and because of that, you're going to get this gift card. So, you can go ahead and buy $750 and you're going to get it all back. Really? Walmart's doing that? Yeah. We want to increase our brand awareness. You can literally see how an evil LLM could be tuned to then further reinforce them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are, these are mostly focused on the consumer. You pulled up a report that talked about some of the things that were affecting the retailers. I think you had another report that you were looking at.
Yeah, this was the Retail and Hospitality ISACs 2024 holiday season sort of trends. And this looks at it from the retailer perspective. And obviously, what was interesting from 24 is that, well, direct sort of attacks on accounts and credentials, that was a thing. Ransomware targeting the actual retailers was particularly intense in this period. And in particular, forms of malware were very prominent. So it was very interesting to see that in terms of the attacks. And what I thought was interesting is the top reported threat actors last year by a long shot was our loosely affiliated group of typically younger teenage males known as Scattered Spider, or by others as the COM or the community. By the way, don't go Googling or joining that Telegram
No.
group. That's not a fun place on the internet to go. But they were ahead of more traditional organized crime groups like Fin6, Fin7, Carbonac, and others by a long shot. So that was interesting to see. And what I'll say broadly is it's part of this massive fraud issue that we're seeing. I just spent Monday in Ottawa meeting with various agencies, intelligence agencies, and others. Fraud is through the roof in Canada and the United States. In the States, there is $10 being lost for every dollar in ransomware being made to fraud. So there's 10 billion in fraud. There's a billion in ransomware payments. We tend to get all excited in the cybersecurity industry about ransomware, but it's fraud that is winning by a long shot.
What kind of fraud? Obviously, the one I've been seeing a lot has been the false invoice fraud, which I think is just kind of crazy. I've never gotten so many invoices, and I've never known whether it was because the attachment had some ransomware attached to it, or if it really was so to attempt to fool me into paying something.
So what we're seeing from the data is so that kind of invoicing, false email, business email compromise kind of theme. So false payments, wire transfers, invoicing, et cetera. That's about 2.9 billion. The 10 billion I just referenced is pure consumer fraud in the US. It's out of control. Again, when we're talking about that, we're talking check fraud, we're talking account takeover, we're talking romance scams, we're talking crypto, but it is bigger business by a long shot than pure professional cybercrime targeting organizations. And I have theories as to why that is.
Which you're going to share. Right? Why?
Police are overwhelmed. And so they are triaging big ticket attacks. If you do a multi-million dollar ransomware attack against a prominent US target, you're getting a lot of heat. You're getting that whole of government, the WOG. You hit grandma, grandpa up for less than 50,000, or in many cases under 5,000. Nobody's knocking on that door ring. And in Canada, Jim, one of the things I just learned, and this information is very troubling, that there were 400,000 calls to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center last year. Do you know how many of those calls they were able to answer?
Oh, don't tell me. I'm 100,000.
30,000.
Oh
We can
God.
answer
I
seven.
thought I was really lowballing it. 30,000?
We can answer 7.5% of the fraud calls going in there. And these fraud calls aren't just the ones the good Samaritans are saying, ha, I spotted this fraud. They didn't get me, but I wanted to alert you. That's part of it. Many of these calls, Jim, are people that lost significant amounts of money. Some of them, they're life saving. Some of them may be suicidal. And this is one of the most important victim impact services to cyber fraud we could be having. And operators are not standing by. They don't even have enough. I found out this week that the team there, the budgets was cut last year. Paradoxically, as things continue to work, the budget was cut and it's anticipated to be cut again because of shifting funds to the new headlines that are garnering political attention and public interest. So at a time when fraud is even worse, when policing is already overwhelmed, we're going to cut it again, which is just stunning. Just to add into the context, these research reports are screaming an alarm to us, both what we're hearing from this report from the cybersecurity company, the volume's up, the activity's up, scams are getting better. They're getting better at delivering different things. The ISAC reports are saying, hey, more people are getting involved in this. And the numbers are up in terms of the cost, and the policing is going down.
Oh yes, the leadership of our government. And when I say this, I'm not being political. I think they all make me crazy, whatever party they are. But we, how can we do that to our most vulnerable citizens? I just, I, I don't see a lot of education. I don't see a lot of intervention. I don't see a lot of prevention. And God forbid, I don't see any use of AI. Cyber criminals are using AI effectively. The government could be using it very effectively too. They could phone every person over the age of 65. There's so much they could do. I'm not the expert at this, but it seems like they're doing nothing.
Bare minimum, and budget cutting to bare minimum. And that's not a slight to the hardworking people across the country trying to make a difference in this fight, but it is huge. And to go back to where we started, criminals have go where the cops are not. Crime 101. And the cops aren't online and they're not looking out for you for small amounts of fraud. So what do we do about all of this mess? What is the total sum? Is it just abandon all ye hope, turn your computers off, throw it away, and get off the internet? Shop local is also not the worst idea. I will put my Fredericton Chamber of Commerce hat on just for a tiny minute.
I totally, for personal, and I will tell you, if you really want to keep your money safe, go to downtown Halliburton and downtown Minden or wherever you are and buy something from a local merchant. You'll do doubly good things.
So that's a strategy. I think being kind to ourselves as human, like the kind of security awareness that we need to start focusing on more than just the technical indicators of a phish is like, hey, when you're going to go do your online shopping, make sure you're rested. You had a good meal. You're distraction free. Set some time aside to go do it. Go directly to the websites themselves. You might see a deal in an email. They usually have a code in the email. Just take a look at that and go and look and see those deals directly on the websites themselves. Listen to your gut. If it seems too good to be true, Walmart is not going to give you a $750 gift card for buying a few items in the store. Think about these things. Take a break. Talk to somebody else. Hey, this is an interesting deal. Maybe I should just ask somebody about this. Hey, what do you think of this deal? And in the process of that conversation, you'll give your brain a chance to get out of emotional arousal and into conversation. And you might just save yourself some money. Slow down. I know we're busy. I know this season is intense. Slow down.
Yeah, which is good advice, but I can't see most of the population who is vulnerable following that advice. And maybe there is nothing a government can do. Maybe there's nothing others can do, but I think we have to find a better way to tackle this. Not taking anything away from your advice. And it does work if you do it in a household. And I said, my wife doesn't listen to the program, thank God, but because she always hates me talking about her, but she's the best person to actually say, and I admit it, she's caught a couple of things that I might have missed coming in, because all of this time I've been talking to her saying, take your time, relax, take a look at it and think. And she'll come back to me with things that she'll spot that I wouldn't. So that works. I don't want to take anything away from that. People could do that with their family, with their children. We don't teach home ec anymore. We don't teach budgeting or anything useful in schools most of the time, but we could be teaching our family to be responsible. And I think that's probably a good place to start.
And I think the biggest thing, and it's funny, I've just got back of 2.5 weeks of nonstop travel in the US. I've been from Miami to DC to Atlanta, back to Ottawa, and then finally home. And I've
Stalking you on LinkedIn. So yeah,
been a lot of places. And one of the conversations I've had with a few people is leading with that empathy. And so it's in the cases of, there was this executive and her parents had fallen victim to a scam, and she was so frustrated, but it was like, remember, it's not about how smart or dumb people are. It's how human they were in that moment. And she said, as she was dealing with what happened to her mother, she was empathetic and she listened and she gave some advice about how to avoid this happening again. And it was more well received. And so less shaming, more listening, understanding, and setting people up for success. But on the theme of setting up for success, what are some of the other things we can do? Obviously, keeping your devices up to date. If you're doing online shopping, make sure that your machine is patched, has antivirus, has good hygiene. This is the equivalent of winter driving in Canada. Before you're going to go on a road trip winter driving, you should make sure there's this thing called winter tires. For those listening in the southern states, you may not be as familiar with those, but they are adapted for our winters. You make sure you got windshield washer fluid, a warm blanket if you break down, you got enough fuel, etc. These are the same things that are required for the information superhighway. Good, thorough planning and preparation make for safer travels and happier times. And just don't think that all this auto magic stuff is going to protect you on its own without you being an active participant in it. And I would think the other part of this that matters a lot, I think how we educate people in context. We don't study this issue nearly as much. Angela Sasse is a prominent researcher in the European Union. She's done a lot of work about how we could be better informing systems to give interventions or educate users in context. And is there a role for online retailers and providers to potentially provide education to their customers in your personal profile, in other things,
I was
yeah.
thinking about that. And there are things I'm always surprised when I hear people say things, and I wish they would do more of it. Like, the government of Canada will never ask for this information. They have all kinds of online contact with people. Adding a little of that, maybe that shouldn't that be a retailer's responsibility? Like a Walmart to say, a lot of people impersonate Walmart. If you need to figure out where they're impersonating us or not, call 1-800-Walmart. And again, these could be automated, but I don't see enough outreach happening from retailers themselves.
And part of this is, again, the margins for retailers are not been massive. These are not big tech companies.
Yeah.
And so I understand the profound thing that I'm saying. And just wondering, this is an opportunity for innovation, I believe. And in fact, transparently, we're actually doing some cool work with banks on consumer fraud education in their mobile banking app. And because for those bankers or others in the financial industry listening to this, the populist tide is turning against banks in particular with respect to people losing money. And, the UK has made moves to hold banks accountable. There was a paper published by the Canadian federal government. The consultation period just ended, which was asking questions like perhaps banks should be on the hook for a certain level of fraud up to a point, which is a super bad idea. Because if people don't feel like they're going to be accountable and responsible for behaving safely, they won't. And that could increase fraud by 30 or 40% if the research we've done on people not feeling like they play a role in protecting their employer and falling victim to phishing. If I make that sort of hypothesis, if the rates are the same, we could be literally setting the fraud losses from 10 billion to 14 by saying the bank's going to pay for it. We're not going to see it. It's just going to get socialized across to everyone else. So I think shared responsibility model where there's a push to get people educated could help.
Yeah. And we did a report on a study that really said that one of the reasons people would move is if they had heard something about their bank, about fraud, that made them distrust their bank. Now, 100 years ago, when I was in financial services, back when we were, chipping the all of our records into stone, they were looking at people never changing their bank. You'd start banking, you'd stay at that bank forever. And we always found that there were these points where people would move: marriages, significant birthday or significant birth in the family, significant pivot points. And hearing about a major fraud or experiencing a major fraud may be one of those new points where people might switch. And that was what the research was saying.
No, I think that's part of it. I think if some of those things being proposed in Canada to combat fraud at the financial services level, maybe online retailing needs to have a component of that as well. What are the best practices that need to be regulated? But again, an hour in Ottawa trying to advance Bill C-26, which has been in progress for 6 years, trying to keep the literally and figuratively in this country. So my hope that they will move on to targeting fraud, given the fact that hospitals are a burning nightmare, pretty low. I'm pretty jaded right at the moment, but I don't know, not completely out of the fight.
No, I'm of two minds in this. There are people, Senator Colin Deacon, if you follow him on LinkedIn, he's a breath of fresh air. And he
Yeah.
was pointing out some private member bills that people were raising to be able to do things, to get things moving forward. And I went, first of all, who are these private members? Could we have their names so we can go vote for them? The second is, why does it take a private member to get legislation that makes sense? And that drives me crazy. This Bill C-26 are like, I'm apoplectic about how many years that is. I can't even, I start to shake when I think about that. It's like listening to somebody, and I'm not on the people who are working. The people who work for the government are hardworking.
Yep.
But we've lost our direction, both in the US and Canada, I think, in terms of leadership. And it really makes a big difference. When people will tell me that they're studying something and they've been at it for, 3 months looking at this thing, I'm saying, you are no longer part of the world as I know it. It's moving far faster than that.
And I think the political parties that figure out how to address the growing online fraud problem that extend well beyond Phishmas, that continue all year round, I think are the ones that are going to gain attention, particularly in the political culture and climate we're in today. With the again, turning this into a political podcast, but you asked, what can we do about this? And we talked about the vigilance that people could do. We talked about the technical steps people could do. And none of these are silver bullets, but also none of these are going to be worth a damn if the neighborhood keeps getting worse and worse and worse online. And so the best thing that listeners can do to this, what do we do to change the game, is actually demand that politicians actually care about this and talk about it and look at common sense initiatives to actually combat this, including, I don't know, funding the online crime portion of your national police forces to deal with where all the criminals ran off to. And everyone's patting themselves on the back that physical crime and various things are on the downward slope. This is amazing. Yes, because cops are in the real world. They're not in the virtual world. So let's give Santa Claus a win. Let's protect Santa the reindeer from Phishmas, and let's start actually tackling this problem.
Wow. I think we're going to leave it there, David. That's we've solved world hunger and this problem. But I think the issue is that hopefully we as professionals will take one piece of advice from you, and that is no shaming. Have those discussions. But the second is we said we're not political, and we're not. I'm not anymore. I've got no time for all of them. But I know that they will do what people are excited about and what people talk to them about. So send your MPP or your MP a phishing email. No, not a phishing email, a regular email. Sorry, that just slipped out. Send them an email, or God forbid, when the strike's over, send them a real letter and tell them that you really do feel the fact that your grandmother or your grandfather or your elderly relative or somebody in your family could be defrauded, and they're not putting enough muscle behind it. And I think if we feel that way and we express ourselves, maybe we'll move the play just a couple more yards down the field.
If we can save one more senior from heartbreak, if we can rescue one Christmas from holiday fraud, is that not worth quick email, a quick action to legislators? Everyone, I know we're trying to wrap up, but we all talk the big game about the holiday spirit. And maybe the holiday spirit also involves looking out for each other and thinking about a better next year and a better future. Because I would love to say that at the end of this podcast, this time next year, we'll say Phishmas was canceled. Not going to be next year. But I would love to say a day where, do you remember when there was a thing called Phishmas? And we've now turned the page on that. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yep. It's only once a year, Mr. Scrooge. David, thank you. Thank you to our audience for listening to this. Hopefully we didn't get too morose about it, but we did want to really put out some of the research out there, talk about some of the things that were there, give you some insight to them. And if we hit the mark, let me know. If we didn't hit the mark, let me know. Editorial at technewsday.ca. You can reach me there. Thanks a lot. Thanks to my guest, David Shipley. Merry Christmas, David. We'll probably have one more show before then, though.
Absolutely. I guess happy Black Friday, Cyber Monday to those that celebrate. I hope for a Merry Christmas, not a Merry Phishmas.
And that's our show. We have links to the two reports. They'll be in the show notes. You can find those at technewsday.com or .ca. Take your pick. And once again, thanks for listening.